Welcome.
This is part two to estrangement.
Yes,
After session. I'm Trev.
I'm Jen.
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, so part two, we were going to talk about estrangement that maybe I guess we could say we initiate.
Yes.
Okay. We um we put that hard boundary down because there is so much toxicity.
hmm
Okay. Have you ever had to do that in your life?
Yes, I have.
Me as well.
Okay.
Very difficult.
Very, very difficult.
We were talking about guilt before. There's a lot of guilt you have to work through with that one as well.
Agreed.
I think those situations are for when someone disrupts your peace to the point that you are not healthy.
Yeah.
Right? You are having unhealthy thoughts. You are having unhealthy behaviors. You're violating your own boundaries all the time. Obviously, abuse. If you are being abused, this would be a situation where you need to cancel.
Right. Well, and I think kind of in that vein of looking at the different types of or reasons that would warrant, putting a really hard boundary of no more communication. When we talk about abuse, it's important, I think, to kind of review that we have multiple different kinds of abuse, and that abuse isn't always just what we think of in our minds as like sexual or physical.
Right.
That actually some of the more hurtful and powerful forms of abuse that fly under the radar are the emotional, mental, financial. There's a lot of different kind of things that fall under those umbrellas, but those are the ones I think that generally most often lead to the guilt and the confusion, because those types of abuse can be so tricky.
Yes, because they can mess with your mind. I've said this before to someone. I felt like I was in the twilight zone.
Yeah.
And so then you're questioning yourself, you're questioning your own reality.
Yeah.
Those should all be, I think, red flags that this is someone that you probably need to estrange yourself.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. So let's get into it. Let's dig deep. Let me give you a challenge. So I am really reflecting on my relationship with my dad. I'm just gonna kind of hypothetically put something out there.
Okay.
I'm a person who has a long history of toxic relationship with my father, where let's just say that there's a lot of manipulation, there's a lot of mental abuse. It becomes to where I recognize as an adult and reflecting back that I've walked on eggshells maybe my whole life, that any communication with him seems to be very transactional, that his love for me is not unconditional, it's very conditional. That no matter how much I try to talk to him and help him see my point of view, he refuses to do that. He's defensive. He's very protective of his own views on things, and he really flips it and makes it my fault all the time. So I've attempted to talk to him. I've attempted to try to mend the relationship. It just doesn't work. There's nothing I can say or do that will change the way he thinks. And with that, he continues to do the same things to me over and over and over again. And here I sit and think, I do have a lot of love. I'm bonded to this person because they're my parent and I'm connected to them, and I will always be. And I do have gratitude for their involvement in my life, whether it been good or bad, that they have in some way contributed to who I am today.
Absolutely.
Where do I go? What are the different things that I look at? At what point do you think it's fair to say I've had enough? And what does that look like to communicate that I've had enough? Or do I communicate that? Do I just walk away? Do I have the conversation? It gets ugly.
So I think the when have I had enough question, that is so varied,
hmm
on the person, their own tolerance levels, what is going on. The example you gave, I think you really look at yourself and say, you'll know when enough is enough. You will know because you are not healthy.
So explain that to me. What does it mean what would be some red flags that I would look for that would indicate that I am not healthy?
So if we look at physical first, if you notice that you are having massive changes in your eating habits, whether you can't eat because your stomach's always in knots, or you're eating all the time because you're trying to comfort yourself, sleep difficulties, things physically, heart racing, panic attacks, anxiety attacks. Um, but mentally healthy is, again, your moods are all over the place, right? You are struggling to feel good about yourself. You're feeling like you're in that twilight zone all the time. So you're constantly questioning your own reality. You are noticing that you're highly irritable, you're extra clingy. Again, all of those things are because you are questioning your own reality. That's when I think you notice I am not healthy right now. I can't seem to trust my instincts. I can't seem to trust my own experience. I'm constantly feeling like a failure. Uh, that's when you know you're not healthy. And if the root cause of that is your interactions with, in this example, your dad, every time you talk to your dad, that's how you feel. I think that's when you kind of know I need to make this decision. However, do you communicate it or not? That's another somewhat loaded question. In can this person receive it?
Yeah.
If I tell them, can they receive it? Or will it just be another situation where I'm being gaslit? I'm being told I'm the problem. Then maybe you don't. Maybe you just walk away. But I think more often than not, people will give a shot at explaining it and saying, I'm done. And there are some things you could do if you know what you're going to get back is um, going to be, really abusive, horrible. You can block that person. You can hang up the phone. You can walk out of the room, depending on how you're telling them, so that you don't have to hear it and experience that. Um, but I think once you tell them, I've had enough, this is why. For a lot of people, that feels really good because they finally got the power or they feel powerful. And then you stand.
Yeah. And that's a good point too, that I see a lot is it is so hard. And so repeatedly, it's easy to say, I'm done. I'm out. I can't do this anymore. But then some time passes, and we all know that time heals a lot. And so then you kind of forget, but it doesn't seem as severe or as offensive as it did in the moment that you said, I'm done.
Always happens.
And then that person comes back in, and you're like, okay, it wasn't that serious. And I'll let it back in. And then you go through this ongoing cycle of that. And I think that is a really rough too, because then you're in this constant pattern of healing and then going back to being broken, healing and then going back to broken. And in the meantime, the person that you're trying to distance yourself from learns very, very solidly that I can always get back in and I can always find a way
Oh,
to manipulate this person
yes.
back into my life.
Yes. You've got to be able to stand on it. You've got to be in the right. That brings me to you've got to be in the right mindset. You've got to know when you have that conversation or you make that decision, even if though you're not going to have a conversation, you got to know I am ready.
Yeah.
I can do this.
One question that I asked a lot of times when someone comes to the place where they're saying, okay, I'm ready and I'm done, is I try to envision have them envision if something were to happen to this person, right? So if, especially a close family member, if they were to be severely injured, hurt, become very ill, or pass away, how would you feel about that? Having not talked to them for a significant amount of time, how would that feel to you? Because I think that's the one thing that really, really we forget. In this moment, this person's alive and everything is well. But when they're gone, when we feel like we did all we could do in this relationship.
Maybe you just answered your own question that you posed to me in the challenge. How do you know when you're ready? Okay. Maybe it's you take that scenario and you say, if this person were to no longer be here, would I feel like I tried? I did what I could, and this is warranted. And so if they were no longer here, I don't feel that I have left something on the table.
Yeah. And I think the other, it's a pretty heavy loaded question. And you think, wow, I would be okay with it is honestly a lot of times the answer to that question I get. And I say, okay, well, that's telling. The other thing I think of too, and I think is really important to acknowledge it is that when you close a door, nothing is ever forever except for death. Death is forever. But to be fair, nothing is ever forever. Most likely that life happens, right? You can't ever say with certainty. I shouldn't say that. Let me rephrase that. There are things that are forever, but we don't know if they are going to be or not at that time.
Yeah.
So you never know what's going to happen in the future. Maybe this person, whoever they are, maybe there's addiction that runs pretty deep, and that's why they treat the way they do. Maybe there's someone in their life that's influencing them and manipulated them into treating you the way that they do. So sometimes I think it's also helpful to say right now, and until that changes, right now, this is where I'm at, and this is what I need to do.
You raise such a great point, because I think that in framing it as right now, that also allows you to think what would need to happen in order to open that door again. Because there can be things that can happen.
Absolutely.
So that's a great. I think there are certain people, certain situations where that door is never going to open again.
Yeah.
Due to that other person's own mentality, whatever that is. If it's addiction, it's too far gone, too much damage, who knows? But there are situations, you make such a great point, where you can say for right now, and then be aware, this is what I would need. And then include that. If you tell the person, but we're estranging, I don't know if that's a word, but we're estranging, and this is why, and here's what I would need. But you have to have a very clear idea of what that is.
And I think that is actually probably the most powerful way to be able to navigate what that looks like. Because if you think of it this way, when you do that, when you put that boundary in place and you give that person that, you're releasing it from yourself and you're giving it to the other person. You're saying, I have done all I can do here. It's your turn. It's your turn to meet me where I need to be met. And if you can't do that, that one's on you. But I've done everything I can do. I've tried. But it's a really good, and I think, when I think
Empowering.
very empowering. When I think of estrangement, I think that to me is the one thing that comes into mind is that there's the guilt and the shame that feels from that you carry sometimes for cutting that person off. So if you're able to position that in a way of saying, here you go, this one's on you. This is what I need. And the other part of that is too, I think that people deserve to have that. I think that it's a disservice to not tell someone what you whether or not they choose to do anything with that is on them. But if you don't tell them what you need, I feel like the disservice comes in not giving them the gift to change.
Yes, the opportunity, which is a gift. That is also such a great point, because that leads into, and we can do a whole episode on this at some point, because I hear a lot of people tell me, I shouldn't have to tell such and such what I need. I should know. None of us are mind readers that I know of. And it is absolutely appropriate to share your needs. You can be in a marriage for 20 years. Your needs change.
Yeah.
So you've got to be able to communicate that.
Well, and actually, just as you said marriage, I was like, oof, there's an estrangement that comes up quite a bit. That could be qualified 100% as an estrangement. And so I think of, when you get to the end of a line in a marriage where you've done everything you can do, where have you really? Have you really given that person the gift? Now, if they're not listening and they've checked out, which a lot of times is the case, or they're not doing what it takes to be able to save the marriage, and you're sitting there screaming, whether it's loudly or silently, 100%. But I do see that a lot where they should know. They should know.
They should know. That's exactly right. And no, each of us, we're different people. We have different DNA. We have different experiences that we're coming into this relationship with.
Yeah.
If we're talking about marriage or a relationship, they're not going to know. They may view something totally different. That's okay too.
Yeah.
But here's what I need.
Yeah.
And then is that person able to do that? Is there a negotiation of, okay, appreciate the need. Here's what I can see I can give in that, or you can cool with that. And
well, and I think too, talking about that's healthy communications on both sides.
yeah,
A lot of times when we get to the point of estrangement, my hope is that it's not part of that cancel culture of like, oh, you didn't do what I needed, so I'm out.
No.
That's so unfair.
because we're talking about when it's toxic and that person
Yes.
cannot have healthy communication.
And I think that is the thing that I really, really want to really look inward and then also stress outward is that don't just cancel someone out, but in the same breath, also recognize when there is no hope for change.
When it is so unhealthy for you, it is okay.
It is.
To estrange yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're protecting your peace. You're living in your boundaries that are healthy. They're healthy. You're not asking for anything that is outrageous.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is hard. That is a thing, when we talk, I think we all, as culturally, families are huge. Everybody wants and desires for the most part to have a family. And it is so heavy and so heartbreaking when you see families fall apart. And I see that so much in a lot of different contexts. I see
I do
it when
too.
kids come to age and then maybe they marry someone who manipulates them into thinking their family is toxic and then they remove themselves. I see it from adult children who come across a difficult time in life. They need someone to blame. And so they blame their parents and hold them responsible for things that really frankly their parents did the best they could at the time raising them. I see it happen in so many inappropriate spaces, but then in the same breath, I see it happen in so many appropriate spaces where my parent was a narcissist and absolutely abused me through control and manipulation and conditional love to the point where as an adult, I can't find myself in my own identity unless I break that. I see it where addiction comes in, where you have a parent and a child who's maybe really addicted and they're using you and just abusing you. And it gets into this codependent relationship.
Brother, sister, brother.
Yes. It's so far.
I think that's our lesson after this session is that it is absolutely necessary sometimes to cut someone out of your life. Resolving any guilt you have over that is going to be important because there are situations when you have to cut someone out for your own sense of health, peace, and wellness.
But I think in the same breath that absolutely that's applicable. But my point is don't be so quick to do that.
Absolutely.
Go through the motions. It's just kind of like you have to be able to go through the motions to be able to get to the end to know 100% that's what, because it's life changing.
It is
For not only you, but for someone else, for families as a whole. So don't come to that decision lightly. Cut someone off like that and walk away. That's very unhealthy. If you find yourself doing that, take a beat and say, whoa, 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 whoa.
Yeah. What's going on with me? Why can I so easily cut people off?
Yep. Yeah. 100%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.